when I was deployed to a country that had a cholera outbreak. The government didn't want to call it a cholera outbreak because of political reasons. That meant that the country couldn't get access to the vaccine, which was needed for the most vulnerable people in that country. And
Wow.
I visited a local health center, and it was this tiny place. It was a total mess. It was falling apart. They had almost no medicine. And the country was undergoing a famine, which is what had resulted in the cholera outbreak. And the local doctor there took me to one side and he told me in a hushed voice, because this was not a democratic country, it was an autocracy, that an NGO had come and visited the health center a few weeks earlier, had offered to rebuild it, restock it, and the local health officials had essentially turned that NGO away so that children would keep dying and money would keep coming. And
Oh my
I
god.
I reported that back to someone who was higher up than me in the institution that I was with, and it was basically just ignored, right? They looked at me, walked away, finished smoking a cigarette, whatever. And I stayed in that job for another couple of years, and I don't think I realized at the time the impact that had on me, and I felt a tremendous amount of guilt, I think, and complicity, even though I was not complicit. That was nothing to do with me, that those issues, but I think because I felt like perhaps I should have done more. What I could have done, I have no idea. But it led to a lot of feelings of, I think, guilt and feeling ineffectual in that work as well. You're used to, as a doctor, you diagnose, you administer treatment, patient gets better. But that's not what I was doing. I was offering technical advice that wasn't always followed. And even when it was, I'm not sure what difference that was sometimes making. So that was the existential crisis that I think triggered me to become a filmmaker.
Good day, filmmaker Alex Salam of the brilliant film 2020, among others. Alex, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me. I'm actually dog sitting for a friend in Madrid, and it's beautifully sunny and hot, and I don't want to go back to the UK where it's wet.
So it so the air conditioning thing, is there are you air conditioned there in Madrid?
Yeah, my friend is. Lots of places aren't, and I would not want to be in Madrid in 40-degree heat in the middle of the 40-degree C heat in the middle of the city. No, that'd be miserable. No, I'm lucky my friend has aircon.
That's gorgeous. Madrid is a gorgeous city.
It's
So
beautiful.
your filmmaking and background are unique. So I imagine when you go to these festivals, it's an interesting conversation when you start talking to people because they may be asking you, like, "Where'd you go to film school?" Trying to relate, and then you come from a completely different background. What are those conversations like when you tell people, "No, I'm a doctor. I've come at this in a certain different way." Are they mainly fascinated by it? Is there, like, maybe an aversion where they, like, maybe can't relate to you? What is that experience like when you're at a festival and talking with other filmmakers?
It's an interesting question. So I haven't been to huge numbers of festivals, in part because when my first short film came out, Crashing, that was during the COVID pandemic. So obviously there was a lot of restrictions, couldn't travel, and many of the festivals were only online. So actually, Edinburgh is the first that I've been to as a filmmaker in person. Having said that, though, you meet people in the industry,
Of great.
and I think it's a mixture, as you say, actually, of curiosity and also a bit of, I don't know if trepidation is the right word, or uncertainty, or not suspicion. Suspicion is strong, right? It's either curious and really interested. Oh, why? How did you go about that? Why did you
Yeah.
switch? What prompted
Yeah.
you to do that? Or and almost perhaps a bit of, I don't know if it's this person's not of the same clique as us, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
I don't
It
know.
does.
Again, too early for me to tell and give judgment, but I've definitely felt a couple of times as if I've had strange looks of, I don't quite understand why this person is making films, but I don't see them as mutually exclusive. Like many
Right.
others have had other careers and have simultaneous careers.
And I feel like you need that kind of background. So you can go on your website and you can see where you've been and you've done research on medical issues and around the world. So you have a lot of life experience. And I feel like you need to bring that life experience to be a good filmmaker, a good artist. You can't just be like, I'm going to start being an artist and tell the story of the world without experiencing the world.
Sure, I guess that's not necessarily a function of age, is it? I guess it
Right.
depends on your upbringing, what happened to you when you were a child, in your teenage years, in your early 20s, and so on and so forth. I think that if I had approached filmmaking in my early 20s, I would not have had either the maturity to do that with justice or, I guess, a clear focus on certain types of stories. It's through my work as a doctor, in particular, my work abroad and stuff, and some of those challenging situations that I found myself in. That's what's crystallized some of the themes that I'm interested in and that I haven't deliberately pursued. As you make films, these kind of you realize that there's some kind of consistency in the stories and the themes that you're returning to. So I think if I'd gone into this at the age of 25, I would not have been mature enough. I'm in awe of people who can make meaningful, deep, thematically resonant, technically stunning films at the age of
Right.
20, but those are the rarities, right? Those are the rarities.
So instead, you went into the comparatively easy medical profession and became a doctor. So did you always have the love for filmmaking? So you obviously graduated college, went into medical school.
Yeah.
Was that something you also have obviously you have a passion for that, but were they equal passions? Did you know you had a passion for filmmaking as well? And then I'm going to pursue the economically responsible path first before going into filmmaking, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think like many people who become filmmakers, I was obviously in love with film as a child and growing up. I never really seriously considered it. I maybe flirted with it in my teenage years, but I didn't know anyone in the industry.
Right.
So the whole kind of that whole kind of ecosystem seemed like a black box. I had no idea how you get into it. And I wasn't even aware that film school was a thing when I was 17, 18, and deciding what to do in my life. And so I needed a job. I needed a
Right.
job that paid the bills. That's not why I chose to study medicine. I chose to study medicine because I didn't wanna do a desk job. I wanted a
Yep.
job which involved interacting with people, which carried some degree of meaning, and which had the possibility for adventure, and I was very lucky, and that's what medicine provided me with during my 20s and my 30s. For example, I went to Antarctica when I was 28. I spent a year on back then, the planet's most isolated research station. I was doing research for NASA and the European Space Agency. I came
That's
back.
wonderful.
I then started specializing in infectious diseases. I took a break. I did a master's in anthropology, which was just a joy, right? To be able to spend the year and just learn and pursue something that you're passionate about. I came back from that, continued my specialization. Then I took another break and I took a sabbatical. And then I did a lot of work abroad as part of an outbreak response team. And then with that, I did a PhD in pandemic science. And essentially, through that work, I mean, I had an existential crisis, for lack of a better term, and that was probably in my late 30s. That was in my late 30s when that happened, and I think that left a kind of profound impact on me and was very destabilizing in a way, and I gravitated towards filmmaking, and it wasn't a conscious decision that was planned out at the time where I was like, "I need to make a film because I need to do X, Y, Z emotionally, psychologically, technically, whatever." I just it was a feeling and I wanted to do it, and I was very lucky that I had a friend who was a cinematographer, and that's how we managed to make my first short, which was the usual one day in my kind of flat and so on. But it was that, I think, existential crisis that prompted the need to do something that was artistic, that was an expression of myself, and that ultimately has allowed me to explore themes that impacted me during that work in a way. Yeah.
And are you surprised that you don't meet more doctors doing this? Is it just because it's so time intensive to go to medical school, go to internships, residency, all that? It's almost like the sunk cost fallacy of I put in so much time in this, I can't jump to another profession. Because if you think about doctors, they're experiencing the some of the world's biggest hardships in terms of, like, people, right? You meet people on their worst day, you're at the front lines of war, like, anything regarding, like, great human stories, doctors are probably a part of. So are you surprised that there aren't more filmmaker types in this world?
I think medicine is conveyor belt in the sense of you graduate from medical school, you start working, you have your postgraduate exams, level 1, level 2, whatever. You pass those, you achieve those, you apply to do specialization, you do
Right.
that, become a consultant, or I guess in America, it's what, an attending is the
Yeah,
equivalent.
right.
And I think that process, historically at least, maybe less so nowadays, means that when you step off that conveyor belt, it's can be a little bit frightening. And dependent on the specialty that you're in, people again can look at you with quizzical eyes. Infectious diseases is different. It's a specialty that kind of encourages people to do different things and take time out. But many are not like that, at least historically. So I think that's one reason. I think you actually have quite a few artists, doctors. You have quite a few writers. Oliver Sacks, obviously, many others. Michael Crichton was a writer, and also he directed for a while. George Miller, a doctor who became a director. So I think they're out there in different forms. I think as filmmakers, maybe less, and maybe that's because of what you say. It's difficult to make a feature film in your spare
Right.
time, right? Make a short film in your spare time. You can write a book in your spare time, but making a feature film, you can't really do that whilst you're practicing as a full-time physician. In terms of the stories, what was your question about that bit? Sorry.
Yeah, just the idea that do you feel like doctors have some great stories to tell simply because they're at the intersection of all sorts of different emotions, grief, happiness, the all and those are what make a great story, the different emotions. So, do you feel like doctors have a leg up on being able to tell unique stories because of the experiences they have in the medical profession?
I'm not sure about that. I think people love medical dramas in terms of TV series,
Right.
and I guess that's because you get the combination of mystery in terms of
Yeah.
what's the diagnosis, and then you
Excitement.
get the human stakes and the human drama and the human emotions. I think I'm not sure it gives you necessarily access to unique stories other than, say, any other profession, which is if you're a lawyer or if you're a soldier or if you're a police officer
Interesting.
or whatever. I think it gives you maybe a certain flavor of stories. Like each profession can have a flavor of stories. I think what medicine has done for me as a filmmaker is it gives you a good understanding of character and emotion, people at the extremes of life, and happiness, joy, sadness, anger, fear, rage, whatever. And so you
Right.
get a good understanding of emotion, which helps you with character and helps you when you're directing in a scene, in a moment. What is the character experiencing? What is their emotional state? What is the contradiction? Where are the contradictions in their emotional state? Because obviously you can feel two things, not necessarily simultaneously at that moment, but in close proximity that can be confusing for you as a character or whatever. So I think it gives you a good understanding of character and emotion. I think the other thing it does as a director is patients aren't always truthful with you for whatever reason. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't know it. And sometimes they're not truthful out of fear or shame, embarrassment, guilt, whatever. And so I think over time, as because you see huge numbers, right? I've seen thousands and thousands of patients in my work. You get a good feel for truth and a truthful performance
Mm,
of actors. So being able to recognize when a performance is telegraphed or acted with a capital A versus the actor is absolutely in the moment and responding to the person opposite them or the circumstances or the events or the surrounding physical environment, whatever it is, but they are giving you a truthful performance. So I think that's part of what's allowed me to do. And then I think third aspect is the precision and methodical nature of the filmmaking. Yeah, for sure.
oh, I love that answer. I never thought about it that way, but you are encountering thousands of people, so you all humanity in all its different forms in a way that maybe some other professions don't. That's really unique, and the precision really shines through on your website. So, I wanna read a quote that I really loved, and it talked about what you were able to precisely describe your stories, and you say, "My stories often involve placing characters in intense situations that force them to confront their humanity and their moral decisions." And you referenced in this conversation on the website, just traveling, researching epidemics made you question your moral character. What do you mean by that? And like, how does it affect your filmmaking?
So when I was working as part of an outbreak response team, I wasn't providing direct medical care. That was not the role that I was in. The role was technical advice to ministries of health and various institutions. And I think I was naive going into that world. I thought institutions were always there to do what's best for the population. And it became apparent over time that's not always the case. Maybe not a surprise,
Right.
but I was naive about
Yeah.
that. Reputations are at the forefront of any institution, and which means that they will sometimes place reputation above action, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
that was a real eye opener for me, and I think things came to a head when I was deployed to a country that had a cholera outbreak. The government didn't want to call it a cholera outbreak because of political reasons. That meant that the country couldn't get access to the vaccine, which was needed for the most vulnerable people in that country. And
Wow.
I visited a local health center, and it was this tiny place. It was a total mess. It was falling apart. They had almost no medicine. And the country was undergoing a famine, which is what had resulted in the cholera outbreak. And the local doctor there took me to one side and he told me in a hushed voice, because this was not a democratic country, it was an autocracy, that an NGO had come and visited the health center a few weeks earlier, had offered to rebuild it, restock it, and the local health officials had essentially turned that NGO away so that children would keep dying and money would keep coming. And
Oh my god.
I reported that back to someone who was higher up than me in the institution that I was with, and it was basically just ignored, right? They looked at me, walked away, finished smoking the cigarette, whatever. And I stayed in that job for another couple of years, and I don't think I realized at the time the impact that had on me, and I felt a tremendous amount of guilt, I think, and complicity, even though I was not complicit. That was nothing to do with me, that those issues, but I think because I felt like perhaps I should have done more. What I could have done, I have no idea. But it led to a lot of feelings of, I think, guilt and feeling ineffectual in that work as well. You're used to, as a doctor, you diagnose, you administer treatment, patient gets better. But that's not what I was doing. I was offering technical advice that wasn't always followed. And even when it was, I'm not sure what difference that was sometimes making. So that was the existential crisis that I think triggered me to become a filmmaker and so explore themes such as moral culpability, right? Or putting characters in very difficult situations where there is no easy decision, and I think that's ultimately, like, quite dramatic. If your character is faced with an easy decision, that's not so dramatic. If they're faced with this decision where the 2 outcomes are almost equally bad, right, then that reveals character. And not only does that reveal character, but as an audience member, you go, "What would I do?" And so through that, you have a better understanding of yourself, right?
That is an incredible answer. Wow. And so you took that moral quandary and turned it into great films. You've made 3 short films now, Crashing, Ma, and 2020, your latest. And it seems like it was very methodical in terms of how you approached just reading from the website, how you approach filmmaking. And that's not a word that's typically used with creativity, but in your latest 2020, extraordinarily creative. So how did you manage to take that moral quandary that you felt and send it into filmmaking? And then did you, like, have a plan, "You know what? I'm not gonna do a feature film, I'm gonna do shorts to establish myself." How did you go into this into the process of filmmaking and think about how you were gonna tackle it?
Do you mean by that, how did I develop a process and how did I develop a process as one aspect of that question?
So you had the whole world open to you, right? You could have said, "I'm gonna start a feature, I'm
Yeah,
gonna do all sorts of things," but you've so far created 3 shorts
yeah,
on those sort of topics that you
yeah.
talked about, the moral quandary, and that must have been a decision that you had of, "This is the way I'm gonna approach it." And what brought you to that specific decision to go about it in the way that you have?
I think you'd have to be clinically insane to go straight to a feature without having done a short or worked on TV or been on a film set. You gotta be mad. Also, who's gonna give you the money? No one's gonna give you the money. So unless you're incredibly wealthy and also bonkers, I think there's no scenario where and I'm not wealthy. Maybe I'm a little bit bonkers. It's a place to learn, right? It's a place where you start to learn and you develop craft, test your craft, and you make some mistakes and you learn from those mistakes and you develop your process and yeah, I have a methodical process that partly comes about as a result of, I think, how I approach and how we're taught to do medicine, which is very methodical. And so there's multiple layers to what that process and what that methodical nature is. So I guess that's answering one aspect of that. I think you said, how does that work in terms of creativity?
Exactly, yeah. If you have such a, like, methodical mind, then how are you making so 2020 is brilliant. You're using sound, you're using black and white images, So there's this creativity part of it. So how do you meld that methodical nature you bring to it with also creativity is like left brain, right brain type of thing of you're utilizing your full mind to approach this? Or was it something that you just studied, you watched a lot of films and you thought this would be an interesting way to do this film?
Well, so I think, perhaps one of my limitations more as a writer and as a director is the fact that I can be hyper logical. And
Right.
when you're writing, you to a certain extent want to abandon that in the moment of writing. Obviously, you're gonna do your research and you're gonna do lots of thinking about what's the story, what's the character, what's the scene, what is the relevance of that specific scene to the entire story, and so on and so forth. But when you come down to write it, I think you almost wanna let some of that stuff go, and that's one of the things that I've struggled with as a writer is too much editing on the fly, too much critical thinking as I'm writing. I think that's less of an issue when it comes to directing. I think the methodical nature of approaching a scene allows your if you can define the right questions to ask in a scene, and then you give your brain some space, the images, for me at least, will come, right? Or the sounds will come, or the idea for an edit or a cut will come. So I think that structured methodical approach, what is the scene about? What is the character experiencing? What is the piece of knowledge that they gain? At what moment? What is the emotional shift that happens? How are they different at the end of the scene compared to the beginning? What is this scene thematically about, independent from what happens to the character? How does this play in the context of the entire scene? If you, all of that can then allow you space and freedom to, be creative in that moment, I think. In terms of learning the craft, I didn't go to film school. I just did. Finished at the talent lab this year with a national film and television school, but I haven't done a full film degree. And with my first two shorts, I hadn't been to film school. It's just watching over and over again, watching the same film as well over and over again, and analyzing the scene and analyzing the choice of shot, the choice of edit, the choice of sound, little moments in the performance, and that's part of the joy, at least for me as a
Right.
filmmaker. Yeah, I love watching a film that I think is technically astonishing and then watching it over and over again and learning something from it. That's part of the joy.
What makes a great short for you? Because I do wonder about that. I watch a ton of shorts for doing this podcast, and I wonder, like, you could get a short that's everything is good about it, like a good acting, filming, and for whatever reason, it doesn't connect with me, and it makes me curious about my mind defines a good short. Or have you been able to think about that? Like, when you're watching a short film, what draws you to a particular film versus another film?
Have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a story.
Yeah.
No, like, obviously, if you've got great cinematography, great editing, great performances,
Yeah.
fantastic, but at the end of the day, if you don't have something that progresses, right?
A story.
Story, a
Yeah.
beginning, a middle, and end, if it's a lot of stuff happens, and then this happens, and then that happens, and then this happens, but as Trey Parker and Matt Stone put it, you need therefore, right? This happens, therefore that, but
Right.
this, whatever. So, I think but I think that's really challenging actually with a short film to get a beginning,
Exactly.
an end, and what feels like a complete story. It's actually quite tricky because you don't have the time that you do in a feature, but that's a great constraint because I think that forces you as a filmmaker to have a really clear understanding of what is the story, and then obviously you can apply that in your feature.
And that's one thing that I loved about 2020 is the subtlety of it, and it's rare to say that about a medical film because normally you would think, "Maybe I'm doing a rewatch of ER, so maybe I'm just colored by that of just doctors screaming at each other and that kinda thing," but you don't find that in 2020. It's like you dial it back, and then you let the sounds and the filmmaking take control over it. How did you find that particular pace for the film? Was there any other version of it where it was like this hectic medical thing? Or did you always know that you were just gonna dial back those characteristics so the other things like sound and the black and white nature of the film can shine?
I guess first thing to say is actually things are rarely hectic on the wards in hospital. People
Okay.
shouting and screaming is relatively rare, right? Even in, like, emergencies, if people are doing their job properly, it's calm setting and stuff. I think I think it's easy when you're doing something that is set in a medical environment to veer towards melodrama, and I was very conscious of that, and I didn't want the film to feel melodramatic, and so therefore, obviously, there are some big moments, but you can modulate that to a certain extent with the performance. That's one aspect. The second aspect is which I wanted to make the film stylized. I didn't wanna film it in a cinema verite, and I guess for people who don't know what the film is about, it's set over one brutal night shift at the height of the COVID pandemic and tells of a very seasoned doctor's emotional transformation as a result of that. And it's partly based on some of my experiences working on the wards during COVID and some of the patient interactions that I had. And so if you're tackling that kind of subject, it's I guess the obvious or the easy way to film it is in cinema verite, right? Get your handheld camera and make it feel like as if the audience is there. I didn't wanna do that. That's not the kind of filmmaker that I am. It doesn't allow you to be as precise with your framing and with your editing and so on and so forth. And I think actually the stylization helps to accentuate that character's emotional journey, and it helps to punctuate certain emotional moments in the film.
Yeah, 1,000%. That's what I got out of it as well.
And in terms
So
of black and white, actually, so that was actually a very important thematic decision. My feeling is that, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't think as individuals and as a society we've fully processed the pandemic, and I think there's multiple reasons for why that is the case. And I think we're treating it as if it's in the past, in the deep past. We've just chosen to mostly ignore it, right? It's not been very prominent in cultural discourse. I don't know many films or TV series or
yeah,
stuff that have dealt with it. And so I wanted to speak to this idea that we're treating the pandemic as if it's in the deep past, hence the black and white. I think the other thing that the black and white does is, hopefully, at least at the beginning, when the audience discovers that the film is set during the pandemic, slightly unsettles slash confuses them. And whether that's, I don't think that's necessarily consciously, but hopefully what's happening subconsciously is they're going, hang on a second, why is this in black and white? The pandemic was only 5 years ago, which will then speak to this idea that we're treating it as if in the deep past when we shouldn't be treating it as if it's in the deep past and we should be processing it and it should be part of the cultural discourse. So that was two reasons for the black and white. I think the other thing that the black and white does is it allows us to isolate the character more. It makes her feel more alone over the course of this night shift. And when I was part of the work that I did when COVID was on in a high dependency unit that was in the basement of a hospital, and it was dark and it was lonely. I was the only doctor there, and it was quite eerie. And I don't know about you, but it's hard to imagine that film in color now because it's so stylized in terms of some of the shots and
completely.
the
Yeah.
edit sequences that if that was in color, I feel like that would be. It just don't. I don't feel as if it would fit, but I don't know. We'd have to make it again in color to know for sure.
And what was your reaction when it was screened? Was that sort of what people took away? What we've been talking about is what the audience took away from watching it in theater?
It was interesting actually. Someone said to me they'd seen it prior to the first screening we'd had in the cinema at Edinburgh, and he said to me after, he says, "Oh, and when I first watched it, I was quite judgmental because I said, 'Why is this in black and white?'" That was what I was trying to get at. But yeah, it's great. It was great seeing it on the big screen because I think it's quite a cinematic
It
film.
is.
I definitely wanted to go for that. I was very conscious again, this is set in hospital. People are gonna have certain expectations of what a drama in hospital looks like, and I wanna go against the grain there. I wanna go against what the expectations are, and I think, again, by going against the expectations, it's perhaps the audience thinks, "Oh, I know what a hospital drama is." You go against that, and then I think what that might do is, again, punctuate the emotional moment stronger. I'm not sure, but I think that's what it might do. So I was very conscious of this has gotta look cinematic, right? It's gotta be cinematic, and also I wanna be a cinematic filmmaker. That's the kind of filmmaker that I wanna be.
And a tremendous sense of place. Alex, one thing that I have noticed that things that I really like is that it's grounded whatever the film is, it's grounded in where it's at. So, if you are gonna set it in, say, New York City or London, you let the audience know we're in London, but you give people the sights of London. I feel like the films that don't really work, you don't know where they're at. There could be in a generic place. You're not really connecting with the location. One of the things that works about 2020s is, like you said, you're connected with the hospital. You immediately take you to what it feels like to be in, like, in a claustrophobic hospital, and I think that's a big part of it. you put aside story, you put aside acting, even filming, like, being in the hospital, setting your audience to where they're supposed to be in their mind, I think that really helps a film.
Yeah, you're that's w an advantage, I guess, if you're making a drama set in hospital is it's a shortcut.
Right.
Yeah, it's a shortcut.
Yep.
The audience knows, "Okay, this is where we are," and they have certain expectations, and you can subvert those expectations potentially. But I don't you don't need to show someone getting on the bus, going to, like,
Right.
all the work. If the opening scene, it's clear where you are, what's
Yeah.
happening. Obviously, we needed the radio to establish when we are, so that broadcast that you use at the start. So that was, I think, a challenge was to because the title per se, I don't think gives it away on
No.
its own. So the part of the challenge was how do you provide that exposition of the fact that we're at the height of the pandemic in an efficient way, and we had to find that radio actually broadcast in the sense that we had to find that moment through the development of the script as a way to do it. Yeah.
Love it. Alex, on your website, you list the different fellowships, competitions, labs that you've been a part of, almost too many to mention. It's fantastic. So what have you broadly taken away from those? Are there things that you're left with, "I'm glad I did that because of XYZ," like something along those lines that you can trace to each one of that makes you glad that you did each particular program?
I've learned something different from each one, obviously. So with 2020, we were in a very luxurious position because as part of this talent lab, so it was 24 of us who were part of the talent lab that's sponsored by the Sean Connery Foundation. And so they select essentially 6 editors, 6 writer directors, 6 producers, and 6 cinematographers.
Oh,
And then
wow.
we come together as a team well in advance of making the short film. And, the producer, the writer director develop the idea together. Obviously, to start with, the writer director had an idea, but that is very much a collaborative effort with the producer. And then it was a real luxury to have the editor and to have the cinematographer in advance of filming with substantial time and substantial prep. And so that prep period is absolutely invaluable. And I would love to be able to do that again on my next short film. Obviously, the time constraints are going to be different. But what was really important to me was involving actually not just the cinematographer in the prep pre-shooting, but the editor. So with some of those decisions with regards to the edits, some of them are so specific I'm not 100% sure they're gonna work. I can visualize that cut in my head. I think it's gonna work, but having someone else who can you can bounce that idea off and bring their own fresh ideas is invaluable. So, that was huge. I think also what I've learned, I guess, over the years is the kind of collaborators that I like working with, that are important for me to work with, is other collaborators who can be a little bit vulnerable, if that
Right.
makes sense. It's important to be able to work with people who can say, "I don't know." I don't know. I don't have an effing clue, and then I can also say, "I don't know how we're gonna do this. I don't know how we're gonna shoot this film scene," and that's fine, that's okay. That's actually part of the practice of medicine. When you're faced with a patient and you don't know what the diagnosis is, you don't you don't lie to your patient. You say, "Look, I'm not sure. I think this is what it is. This is what we're gonna do." And I think through that vulnerability, that breeds trust, and that's absolutely essential when you're making a film, right? Because it's such a long, arduous expensive journey with so many risks involved and so many things that can go wrong and there's so many things that have to go right for you to be able to end up with the product that you want. That kind of trust is paramount.
And don't you
Mm.
think you've come into that just because you've been in several different professions, you've done a lot different things in medicine where you're not the top person in the field? So I think like sometimes people get complacent and they think, I want to work my way to the top, be the expert in the field, be the person that everybody comes to. And that's great, good for you if that's what you want. But don't you think that's a bit of a crutch in terms of like human advancement? Like, I like being the person who maybe not the dumbest not dumb is not the right word, but, like, the least knowledgeable person in the room, because that means, like, the ability for me to learn is just so much greater than if I'm the sort of, like, the expert in the room. So I feel like your life story, you put yourself in different situations where you've had to get up to speed in these very intricate topics, and, I think it benefits your filmmaking that you're able to jump into those situations and learn rather than try to just be in one profession, work your way to the top, and you have less room to maneuver, if that makes sense.
I think that part of the joy is the learning, right? And it's
Yeah,
discovering what your process is and then refining that over time and in my case, trying to develop a visual style of filmmaking. I guess maybe the challenges of filmmakers, how do you have a style that feels unique to you? And then that's gonna maybe take some time to develop, but without becoming predictable.
right.
And that's a tough challenge. And obviously there are filmmakers there out there who well-known filmmakers out there who have a very particular style, but after a while it maybe feels a bit predictable and stuff. Whereas others
Yeah.
have a certain kind of style. You know it when you see it, but it's less definable and it's more flexible. And that's what I hope to be able to achieve one day. And part of that process is, look, in an ideal world, hire people who are better than you. Hire a
Right.
cinematographer. And if I look into your feature and stuff, obviously you want to work with, you've never done a feature before, and you'd want to work, if possible, with people who are much more experienced and stuff, and especially in the first feature, right?
I just love that viewpoint because I feel the same way, like, just put me in a room with whoever's the best at whatever we're doing, and I will be so happy to be there and learn from them, and it's just a perfect place to be. So, you have representation at the agency. I'm interested in this because I asked a director, "What does representation do for them as a director?" We know what it does for them as an actor. We know what it does for a writer. Are they mainly there to help you, like, with writing projects when people come to talk with you? Are they working with you on future directing projects? What has that been like, the representation? What has that given you in this profession?
So they're representing me as writer and director. I have one agent for writer, I have one agent for director, and they're
Okay,
collaborating. And I only just signed with them a few weeks ago, and that was
congratulations.
thanks. Thank you very much. That was thanks to 2020, and then a feature script that I wrote last year that won the BAFTA Roadcliffe Writing Prize. I guess so what they're going to do is actually probably act as a team and shop the feature out to
Okay,
production companies along with a link to 2020 as a kind of package. He's a writer director. He wants to direct this film that he's written. And then separate to that, they may shop out a script that I've written, but I don't necessarily want to direct. And I would love to do that. And also, the other option is bringing work for you as a director for something that you haven't written. First time feature filmmaker, that's not going to happen. For rare occasions, you get to make a film that someone
a
else has.
medical drama? I could see
And I'm done with medical dramas. I'm over. I was already paranoid of
interesting,
2020 being the third film, short film set in hospital. I was like, I don't want to be the guy with the phone of making short films set in hospital. So now my next two shorts are absolutely not medical in the future medical. And I'm really excited about the next two shorts. They're actually set in America, the next two shorts. They're not medical at all.
and one of them is Motherland. Can you talk about if you can, talk about the 2 shorts that you have upcoming?
I can't talk too much because I guess if I were
Okay,
to give the log lines or premises, they would become
public,
yeah, and I think they're both really strong ideas. I'm very excited about them. As I said, because not only are they
but
not dramas, but
right.
I think very strong and set in America, one in the past, one in the near future, and I think, given some of the issues at play at the moment, yeah, they're interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about them.
And so now, Alex, full-time filmmaking, do you still have a leg back in the medical world, or are you just
Yeah, yeah, it
gung
pays
ho
the bills.
about
No, it pays the bills. The filmmaking doesn't pay the bills yet. No, I still work as a doctor, but I'm lucky in that I work part-time as a doctor, and so I can spend some time focusing on the writing and the director, and so I'm very fortunate that I have a job that can allow me to do that.
and if somebody's made it through this episode and they wanna watch 2020, idea of when that might be?
So we premiered at Edinburgh, and at the moment we're submitting to other festivals, and so we'll see what
Okay.
happens. But if someone wants to watch it, just ping me an email. You can go to my website, alexsalam.com, or get me on Instagram. I don't really use Instagram much, but only for work stuff. And then I'm very happy to send a link. And if anyone found, I guess, my work interested and are interested in collaborating, give me a shout, or interested
Love that.
in knowing more about my next two shorts. We're looking for funding at the moment. As I said, they're set in America. Then, yeah, give me a shout.
It's a little frustrating, I know, especially that I talk with people and people cannot watch shorts of things that I talk about because rightfully it's in festival, I get that part of it. But
Yes.
do you wish there were more outlets for short films that could be where it's easy to have a YouTube thing where you wouldn't have to spend all your time on social media promoting, like, it could be there and watched more openly rather than the festival process where it's sometimes years before a short is available for people to watch? Have you thought about that sort of process, and what are your feelings on it?
You can do that, right, as a filmmaker, that's your
Yeah, right.
choice. So you've got a choice when you make a film of, do you wanna spend a year, 2 years applying to festivals, getting into festivals, going on the festival circuit, and then you go online? Or do you
Yeah,
want to go straight off the bat and submit to, I don't know, Vimeo, Omeletto, or Shorts of the Week? So those options are out there, and I I guess I don't know enough about the strengths and the weaknesses of each one, and there are strengths and weaknesses to each one. If you unless your film is a viral film, I'm not sure you're gonna
right.
get whatever that means, but it's something that hits that mark. You're not gonna get 1,000,000 hits on YouTube, and I guess the point of going straight to something like YouTube is to try and rack up large numbers of views.
Exactly.
One, because as a filmmaker, you want your film to be seen by people, right? You don't want your film to disappear into the ether and
Never be seen from heard from
yeah,
again.
and only being watched by 100 people in one festival. You want it to be seen by people, but also secondly, obviously, watches gets you context, gets you maybe more chance of funding in the future, and so on and so forth. I guess there's pros and cons. For now, I haven't gone straight to that, and actually with 2020, because it's executive produced by the BBC,
Ah,
um, we have to go down that route of the festival, and I would like to do that anyway, and eventually it will actually go on BBC iPlayer, so it will be
oh,
available online.
fantastic.
Yeah, lucky.
Alex, that's so amazing, and I'm so excited to watch your career because I really think the mindset you bring to it is gonna take you to great heights. So, Indie Film Podcast loves supporting other people's projects. I'm sure as you've gone through this, you've realized, all these fellowships, labs, probably hundreds, thousands of people submitted. So you feel like blessed that you were able to be a part of it. Were there other filmmakers there that you watched their films and you wish more people knew about their films? Anything like that you thought, wow, man, I wish more people knew about this particular film or filmmaker?
I guess you mean like super indie filmmakers, right?
Yeah, like, I would go just as crazy as somebody, maybe 1 view, who knows, something crazy with it, Alex, if there's somebody out there that you feel like needs more love.
I would say everyone who was on the Sean Connery Talent Lab, the 5 other writer-directors who were on the lab and who are all great. So if you're interested, check them out on the
Okay,
NFTS
that's
website,
perfect.
type in NFTS, Sean Connery Talent Lab, and then you'll see them in the films, and what was wonderful about the Sean Connery Talent Lab, excuse me, and all our films was vastly different, like wildly different. So it was quite exciting. Sorry? No. Yes. Before I restart. So I was, really excited, like, really exciting to be in the cinema, and I'm watching all these films that have come out over the last year and all the incredible work that everyone's put in, and which are vastly different. So yeah, check them out. I think they'd really appreciate it.
Alex Salam, the film is 2020, just an incredible story, extraordinary filmmaker. I enjoyed 2020 so much for all the reasons we've talked about, and then to find out just the precision you brought to your filmmaking. It doesn't surprise me, but it excites me to watch your future films, and I'm so grateful for you coming on the podcast.
Thank you.